Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Lisa Haynes. How are you today, Lisa?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. I am so honored to have you on the show. I'm excited about our conversation today, and I cannot wait for the listeners to learn more. Just to share a little bit about you, Lisa, you are at the owner and managing director of Haynes Executive Solutions. And you're an author, and we're going to be talking about your book, which is Retired and Killin It. And I love that title. It's fantastic. So we're going to be talking about retirement planning. It's kind of like the ultimate retirement plan, but it's not just financial. And we're going to get more into that in our conversation today. So Lisa, again, welcome. Thank you for coming on and joining us. Would you tell us how this kind of happened for you? What led you down this path?
Yes, it's a story I love telling because it just kind of happened organically. So I had been serving as a chief financial officer and chief diversity and inclusion officer for a large trade association in the mortgage industry. And I'd been there for 10 years. I'd been doing, it wasn't like it was crazy, like I got to get out of here. Great job, really enjoyed it, but started to feel like I really had done what I came to do. Like I felt like I've accomplished the things that I came to do. And so I'm a member of a networking group called Athena Alliance. And so they offer some coaching. So I met with the transition coach, explained to her, this is what I'm thinking. I have one more big push in me. I'm thinking that I should, look for a role that's bigger, larger company, maybe go Fortune 500, something like that. So she sent me away with a list of questions. She said, I want you to ponder these and then we'll meet again and we'll talk about it. So as I started to think about the questions that they were asking, what kind of company do you want to go to? What does the role look like? How many people are reporting to you? What does the company do? I started to realize I don't want to start all over again. I'm like, I can't answer these questions because nothing is becoming passionate to me. And so I went back to her and she said, well, what do you think? I said, I'm going to retire. And she said, that is not what I was expecting you to say, but I understand. And so that was it. That was kind of the decision to retire. I spoke to my financial advisor and said, can I afford to retire? And he said, you can. And that was all she wrote. I talked to my husband. And so I went in, talked to my boss, I'm going to retire. We started to plan around the date. That was great. And then we started to, I started to help with the recruiting for the job. Got a little weird when you post your own job on LinkedIn, encouraging people to apply. And so that was the beginning of realizing that there was another part of retirement that I don't think I was prepared for, which was the mental part, the psychological part. And so I retired on September 30th, and I'd already been booked to speak at a women's conference on the issue of leadership. And so one of the questions that was asked was, Lisa, you just stepped away recently. What gave you the courage to retire? How are things going? And I said, I think I was born to retire because I'm just really, really good at it. And then I said, and quite frankly, I'm just killing it. I said, it's only been 3 weeks and I'm killing it. It was that phrase that stuck with me. It was like, I really do want to be killing it in retirement. And so after I walked away from there, I bumped into a colleague who sits on a board of advisors with me. And he started telling me about his retirement coaching. Said, never heard of it. I do financial coaching, help people think about retirement from the financial side. But he started telling me about this newer industry about retirement coaching, which is helping people navigate the non-financial side. I looked into it, loved it. And then all of a sudden it started to come to me. People need a plan. I need a plan, but people need a plan. What will I do after I retire? And what are the major things that come about? And so this killing it, the formula just started to come to me to create an acronym using the word killing it. And so I created the acronym, decided, people want to know about this. So I wrote a book and have been coaching people from that perspective. And while I do help them also on the financial side, take a look at, overall what it looks like. I'm not the here, you should invest in this, invest in that, but giving people some perspective on how you think about retirement from financial perspective, more of a financial coaching, and then also providing them with this is what you need. And because I went through it, it became really a passion of mine that people can walk into retirement and it's not the end. It does feel like a little bit of an end when you walk in there like, okay, I have 20 to 30 years ahead of me. That is a long time. And I realized I need a plan, but I want to help other people create a plan. I want them to get excited about retirement and realize they worked all of this time. You've worked so many years. The next phase of your life should be more exciting than what you left.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Gosh, Lisa, thank you for sharing that with us. I think that so many of us can relate to that idea of that transition. Something changes, and it may not be retirement. The people listening may not be at that point. There could be a life change or transition that happens in some form or fashion. And a lot of times we're not prepared for that.
Right.
And so I think retirement is a huge, huge life transition.
Hmm.
And we don't go into it thinking, what am I going to do next?
Right.
Yes, we
Right.
may plan, for our money and our financial situation, but emotionally, we're not really thinking about how we're going to feel. And so I love that you're, taking this from like a whole perspective
Mhm.
and, offering people kind of a roadmap on how to get prepared and make the rest of their life the best of their life. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And what you say is so accurate, Desiree, because it's not just retirement. Retirement is what I'm focused in on, for this particular book. But as I looked at some of the elements, they apply to various areas. People who are starting a new job or transitioning out of a job, people who are looking for their second act. And that second act may be the next phase of your career, right? So some people, they start out here and they say, you know what, I really want to do something completely different and become a nurse, right? And so it could be your second act. It's all transition. Um, and it's all life lessons. And so just being able to help people see, even in my executive coaching, helping people to see the potential of what life can bring them in general by just focusing on a few areas of their life where they may be ignoring them right now because it doesn't seem to be critical. But there are some things that you can do individually in your life, whether you do the entire killing it formula or you choose one thing that really can help you through a transition and help you focus yourself.
Yeah, that's excellent. Good stuff. Super helpful, I think, for all of us to, begin to take those moments to reflect on where we've been, where we want to go, what's happening currently. I think all of that plays a part, right? So I want to ask you, you mentioned about the acronym
Mhm.
Killing It, right? So do you want to talk about that now?
Yeah, so I get all excited about it, so I'm gonna try to keep myself calm. So it just really kind of came about. So each letter has a meaning and then some action associated with it. So the K stands for keep moving. And in particular in retirement, if you're not careful, you become stagnant. And the keep moving is not just physically keep moving, it's mentally keep moving and socially keep moving. And so because things change so much in retirement and also in transition, you have to make sure that you got on target to keep yourself moving physically, to keep yourself moving mentally, to keep yourself moving socially, because social circles start to change when you go through transition. The first I stands for imagine what's next. And this is when you take a step back and you dream big and bold and you say, what are the things I've always wanted to do? Whether you're retiring or moving, what is it that I've always wanted to do? And just allow yourself the freedom to just dream big, to figure out what's next. One of the things that I talk about with clients in retirement coaching is you don't realize how much time you have on your hands until you step out of that role. And so I tell people it becomes 6 Saturdays and a Sunday. Sunday's a typical day where we already have a schedule. That doesn't typically change. But when you now have Monday through Friday that look just like Saturday, it's a lot of time. And helping people design a life that's going to fit into those 6 Saturdays and a Sunday and be exciting for them. It's something that we focus on and imagine what's next. And so the first L is laugh a lot. And so I think one of the things that we lose as we get to be adults is laughter. This idea as kids, we play outside. And one of the things I talk about in the book is as a kid, we were outside from, I don't know, 8 a.m. until we were required to go in the house. I think now, what were we doing for 12 hours? I have absolutely no idea. I mean, you can only play kickball and dodgeball so many times, but we stayed outside for 12 hours, basically playing until it was time to come in. As adults, we stop playing, we stop laughing. And so I like to encourage people, find what makes you laugh and incorporate that into your life. The second L is live for legacy, right? So what legacy are you going to leave? And so that actually applies across the board, whether you're retiring, whether you're still working, what's your legacy? And by legacy, people start to think, well, no, I'm not going to leave $1 million to my kids or my grandkids. Most of us are not. But legacy is deeper than that, right? Dr. Maya Angelou quotes, legacy is every life that you touch. And so the reality is we can all every day create something that's legacy. What are people going to remember you by? What are people thinking about when they hear about you? So that's the second L, live for legacy. The next L is ignite your passion. And so this is where you figure out, what is it that you're passionate about? What do you love to do? What is it that you can do and you lose track of time? And helping people find their passion in any level of transition or time, but retirement in particular, helping people find their passion helps them find their purpose, right? So now you have a sense of, oh, I'm passionate about this. I can now go do this, right? I'm no longer CEO, but I really love doing X, Y, Z, and I'm going to go do it. The N stands for nurture your network. So when you retire or transition, networks change. We always leave jobs thinking we're going to go to lunch with the people we left with. We're going to stay in touch with them. And that's true. We do for about a month or two or three. And then that monthly lunch becomes quarterly. And then we're talking to people annually. And then it's just a text message here and there. So it's really about figuring out who's in your network, which relationships you need to nurture, and which relationships may be those that you invest less in. But at the end of the day, you've got to figure out who's in your social circle and how will that social circle now work and benefit for you. Because when you retire, I'm not networking for a job or for the next thing or an event. I'm networking for my social life. I'm networking for friendships. So that becomes really, really important to figure out who your network is. One of the things we learn in coaching is that the number of touch points when you retire is 50% than when you're working. So the average is 22 touch points a day when you're working, and it drops to maybe 11 when you're retired. I would argue it's even less than that. There are times when you're, as a retired person, when if you're married, talk to no one but your spouse or your partner or whoever's your kids or whoever's in the house with you. There are days that's the only people you may talk to when you're retired. So really nurturing that social network is important. The last I stands for invest in others. So we have some obligation to give back to what we've received, and everybody has learned something that they can teach somebody else. So who will you invest in and how will you invest it? And I also encourage people, if you really think that you don't, I don't have a particular skill I can invest. One of the things we can do is invest in those who are senior to us, right? Listening to their stories, taking them to the store, just small things that we can. We all have people of senior ages in our families. That may be the thing. Maybe sitting and listening to stories that you can pass on, right? So just investing in others. And the T is just the encouragement of tell yourself you're killing it. Sometimes you just get discouraged. Sometimes you're thinking, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I'm bored, or, this is awful. But just to tell yourself you're killing it, encourage yourself that this is the life that I want, and how am I going to build that? And so that's my killing it formula. I tell people, whether you pick a letter or pick all the letters, you can definitely take one of those letters and find that you're killing it on that letter alone, or you can kill it on all 8 of them.
Lisa, that is tremendous. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, just as briefly as we did. But I mean, there's so much in there that is amazing. And you're right. If you're trying to get all of it, it could be a little bit overwhelming. But if you, just target one letter at a time, or
Yes.
one letter only, whatever the case is for you. But I love how you pointed out in there, when you're retired, it becomes 6 Saturdays. And I had never thought of it that way before, but it's so true. It's like, what are you going to do with all that time, right? Yeah, so that's such an interesting point. And so what a great thing to think about, like, and using this formula to help you understand, like, what are you going to do with your time? What is important to you? What do you want to share? And I love that each of these letters is a focus and an intention, what we can do to fill ourselves up and to give to other people. And so it's just amazing. Again, thank you so much. And I'm sure in the book, you're going into more detail in each of these. But again, thank you so much for sharing it with us right now. I think for the listeners, it's a good opportunity to begin to reflect on these things, and then, see how you can implement it in your life.
One
So
of the things I would say to even the younger generations that might be listening is, this sounds like it doesn't relate to me because, I'm not close to retirement. And one of the things I, share with people is, I decided when I was going to retire fairly early in my career. And so thinking about retirement early in your career helps you to design the retirement that you want, right? So even if you're only in your 40s, do you want to retire at 60 or do you want to retire at 55? There's a difference. And if you're going to retire at 55, That means you need to think about what's going to be my plan from 55 to 85 or 90, right? If I'm going to retire at 60, which is still pretty early in this, and the average retirement age now is 67. So if you're retiring at 60, you're 7 years before the average retirement age and 7 years before you can collect Social Security. So what are you going to do for the next 20 years, right? And so thinking about it now to say, well, do I want to create a portfolio of work for myself in my retirement? And how much of that time do I want to spend retired versus playing versus doing things that are work related, right? So thinking about it early helps you to determine when I might want to retire and then what that retirement looks like.
Yeah. And the point applies to both financial
Yes,
and the emotional side of it, the social side of it. And
absolutely.
yeah, you totally went into all of that for us and really thinking about what happens to our social life as
Mhm.
well when we stop working, or we transition out of that, whatever the situation is for us. The touch points that what you mentioned about how we are at 22 touch points in a day and it drops down to, maybe 10 or 11. And it's like, wow.
Mhm.
And what does that do to us emotionally, right? When we lose that interaction with other people, that's a big deal, right?
That is a big deal because we're social beings. Even the introverts, even us introverts are social beings, right? We're made to be connected to each other. And so it's one of those things that you have to be really careful of because retirement in particular can have a high instance of depression, right? So the statistics show that those who are retired can lean more toward depression because of the loneliness associated with it. And that's where the social aspect really comes out. But that also applies to those going through transition. When you leave a job, if you're laid off from a job, you're not connected to those people on that job anymore. So that loneliness is fairly easy to set in, particularly when you don't get a new job right away. We're in an environment right now where, the job market is tough for the person that's seeking a job, right? So it's easy for that depression to set in if you don't surround yourself with those who are encouraging and helping you to move. I actually just got off of a call where there were women on the call sharing about just feeling in this space of, I'm not sure what's next. That environment was so helpful for them to be able to talk to others who are in the same environment. That by itself can keep you out of that space of loneliness or depression when you find what I like to call your network or your tribe of people who you can have that conversation with.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We are social beings. We are intended to be in connection and community with each other. And when we become isolated because of maybe losing a job or this transition into retirement or whatever, that can be very isolating and cause depression. And I recognize that in, a family member who had a very difficult time finding a new job and was, living away from the rest of us. And so the conversations we would have, you could absolutely hear the sadness and the depression and the frustration and the anger and all of that. But when you've got the community, when you've got other people to talk to who are maybe also going through the same thing, it can change your perspective and how you're feeling about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what surprised you the most about your life after you left your career.
What's interesting about that, just heard somebody say, so it doesn't only apply to retirement, but it's the identity thing. When you are in a role, particularly when you've been in a role at a senior level, your identity is really attached to that, but it doesn't have to be a senior level job. If you've been a truck driver for 35 years, that is part of your identity. If you've been, an administrative assistant, that is part of your identity. And so that's the part that kind of surprised me a little bit was moving through the identity thing. One of my clients who I coach said one of the reasons she hadn't retired yet is because she didn't know how to answer the question, what do you do? We live in a culture where after I say hello at any kind of party, the second question is, what do you do? And so when you get into the phase of retirement and somebody says, what do you do? People struggle with, well, I'm retired doesn't sound like enough. And so I had to get myself to the place where not only did a retirement sound like enough, it was so exciting that I wanted to make other people jealous that of what I do. Which so my response to people now is say, what do you do? I say I'm retired and I'm killing it because that's exciting, right? I'm retired and I'm sitting on the couch watching Netflix. It's not exciting. But when I say to people, yeah, and I'll tell people I do whatever. What do you do? Whatever I want, right? Every day I get up and do whatever I want to make it sound exciting, right? There's something that you do. But I do think whether you're transitioning out of a job into another job, there is an identity crisis that happens. And sometimes it's a small crisis and sometimes it's a big crisis because we are somewhat tied to, even if you're not, the big egomaniac with who's crazy about their big title, we are all tied to what we do is a big part of who we are.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think many of us can recognize ourselves, not just maybe a career, title or a type of job, but even like as mothers,
Yeah.
when our children are small, we hold this position in life with them. And then when they leave, who are we now? And so I think we can look at it from that side, from the career
Mhm.
side. We can assign these titles to ourselves in all areas of our life, whether it's a job or our family or whatever. But I think you're right, especially when we are trying to have conversations with people we're just meeting. It is, well, so what do you do? And immediately you want to
Absolutely.
say, well, I do X, Y, or Z.
Right.
And I love that idea of I do whatever I want now because I'm retired, and keeping that thrilling, because you do have an opportunity to
Hmm.
choose what it is that you're going to do with your time.
Yeah.
And so it could be anything that you decide to do.
Yeah. And you make a great point about mothers, stay-at-home moms, right? And this empty nest syndrome. Empty nest syndrome almost mirrors to some degree some of the symptoms of retirement because it's a huge shift in your lifestyle, right? Both are a huge shift in your lifestyle. And so for moms who have spent so much time focused around their children and the needs, and while you start to, roll out of that a little bit as your kids become teenagers and start ignoring you, while some of that does begin to happen, you still are the chauffeur until they get a license. You still are paying all the bills. So there's still this need. And then when they go off to college, that need shrinks even more because now they're calling once a week versus seeing you every day. And then they move out. And so you have this emptiness that happens. And again, if we're not careful of that emptiness, if we're not trying to find the next, if we're not imagining what we could do next, if we're not thinking about what's my next legacy to leave, it's very easy to kind of get in this state of, yeah, life is just, it's just kind of going along versus figuring out how can I, at this state in my life, kill it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and again, it goes back to imagining what you want for your
Yeah.
future, thinking about the things that are exciting to you that you want to pursue. So to begin to make that transition smoother, right? And how can you implement or begin to implement those things as these other kind of time constraints are beginning to diminish? Like you
Mhm.
said, you're not chauffeuring people around, you're not having to cook meals for everybody for every single, breakfast, lunch, and dinner or whatever. How can these things begin to you can pursue what interests you, and that kind of begins to take your time and gives you an opportunity to not, maybe be stuck thinking like, well, now I've lost all value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's why, whatever stage of life people are in, having a plan of where you're going, what are you going to do next? What's important to you? And, that issue of igniting your passion, if you find out what you're passionate about, you can do that as much as you want and as long as you want, right? So find out what it is that really, I mean, for some people, it's gardening. I hate the dirt, but for some people, it's gardening and they can spend hours in the garden and they can plant vegetables and, do all kinds of things. And so when I tell people to imagine what's next, one of the things I challenge them to do is, what's that thing, that big thing? What's your dare item? I call it the dare item. What's the thing that you say, I wish that I just had time and energy to do this. And I let people name that. And I said, I dare you to do it. I dare you to take that on. Right. And because even if you don't completely succeed in it, the fact that you tried at it is going to bring you the satisfaction of knowing I tried this and I got halfway through it and realized it was way bigger than I wanted it to be, or I wasn't as passionate about it as I thought. But it gives you some focus to try something that's big. And sometimes we don't step into that big thing because it just seems like overwhelming. And what if I fail? And my attitude now is, what if you fail? If you fail, what's the worst that could happen is always the question I ask. What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, that's excellent, Lisa. Thank you for that. Dare yourself to try whatever it is that you're thinking. I wonder, just dare yourself to
Absolutely.
attempt it and, see what happens. And I love that point. What's the worst that can happen? It maybe doesn't come to fruition, or you realize partway through, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, and you change course. It's not set in stone, right? We don't have to continue moving forward with something if we suddenly realize it's not what we wanted.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Okay. Let me see. Where do I want to go? How do you think fear creates this barrier for many of us as we're moving through these transitions and getting ready to retire. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that fear plays a huge role. And so, it's interesting because one of the things, when I was on the panel, one of the things they asked about was this issue of fear or this issue of what's hindered you. And I talked about this issue of fear from the perspective of people identifying what their fear is, because fear is big. Like fear has lots of things and lots of tentacles, but understanding what your fear is. And I talked about this issue of, for me, fear of rejection, right? And so being raised in a family, the youngest, yes was often always the answer, right? I was spoiled. I got a lot of things. The problem is no became a rejection. And so I took that into my adult life where if somebody was going to say no, I might not ask you because I don't want to hear no, because no seemed like rejection. And I had to turn that from no isn't rejection. It's not a personal rejection of me. But you bring things from childhood sometimes, and that was one. And so for people who have fears, it's important to identify the fear. Like, so is it a fear of rejection? Is it fear of failure? Is it what's your phobia, right? And so sometimes when we can name the phobia, it will help us to pick it apart. Where'd the phobia come from and does it make sense? Because, we've all seen the quote, fear is false evidence appearing real. So it's not a real thing. Fear is something that we conjure up in our heads. We always make it bigger than it is, but it's a real fear for us. So if we can figure out what the fear is, where did the fear come from? And again, what's the worst thing that could happen, right? And so just identifying the fear, really calling out and saying, I'm afraid to fail. And then you ask yourself, okay, I fail. What happens? What happens if I fail? If it's rejection, what happens if they say no? What's the worst that could happen? So what is the fear? For some people, it's the fear of success. What happens if I succeed, right? They're afraid of what would happen if they succeed. Can I handle the success? What would I do if it's successful? How do I handle that? And so just understanding what you're fearful about really can help you adapt to and adjust yourself to deal with that fear, as opposed to this kind of allowing fear to be this just big monster, this big kind of umbrella over you, like a dark cloud that just hovers saying you have fear, which is so general because we all don't have the same fears.
True, true, true. And such a great way to think about it. I love that false evidence appearing real. That is such a great one. And to name the thing and then begin to examine it, like, what is it about this? I love that idea of taking the time to reflect on the thing so that it doesn't become the thing that stops you from
Right.
whatever your next step is, whatever you want to pursue next. So I love that. And I love the idea of fear being like with tentacles, kind of reaching out into all these areas of your life because it probably isn't going to do all of that. But in our minds, we
Yeah.
allow it to do that. And then it grows bigger. And then suddenly it's like a giant monster, right? But when we
Abs-
stop and examine what the thing is exactly, we can bring it back down to size and then move
Absolutely.
forward.
And
Yeah.
sometimes just speaking out loud to someone else, right? Sometimes you need that third party who says, "Do you know that's not going to happen, right? That's a 1 in a million shot of what you just described could potentially happen to you if you try this, right?" So sometimes just having that person in your tribe, in your network, who can help you speak to, you really can do this, and this fear that you have, I'll stand right behind you. We'll walk through this together, but I don't think any of the things you're afraid of are going to happen. And so sometimes we just need that person next to us to nudge us and say, "Give it a shot."
Yeah, that's true. Oh gosh. Okay. So let's see. We talked a little bit before about how important play is and laughter. So do you want to talk a little bit more about like the role that the connection, the purpose, play, like how all of this is involved in our reinvention?
Yeah, so, I tell a story in the book about some friends and I, and we were in Orlando, and we're all adults. There were no children with us, but we saw this racetrack with the race cars in it, and we ran over it as if we were children, and there was no line, so it was just us. And we jump in these cars, and you would have thought we were in the Indy 500. We literally had a great time, and we're, like, cutting each other off because you can't bump, but we're cutting each other off, and we're yelling at each other, and we got off, and we just started laughing because we realized that as adults, we were really behaving like we were, like, teenagers or kids, but we had a fantastic time. And we still talk about it to this day, just laughing at each other and who won and then there's the competition of who won and who really won, which you really can't tell because you're just going around the circle. So it's hard to know who won. But that's the kind of thing we don't do enough of, right? And so, there are studies that show that the endorphins from laughter really do help are beneficial to us from a health perspective, right? Laughing is. And so I happen to be one of those people. I love laughing. I love to make people laugh. I just think laughter is one of those things where when you can get a good belly laugh, there's almost nothing better than that, laugh till you cry kind of a thing. But one of the things it does is helps put life in perspective, right? Sometimes we are so serious. We take life so seriously, and just laughing about things, including ourselves, really does help us put things in perspective. I talk about you have to. There are people who get frustrated with themselves a lot, and I'm like, but you have to admit it is funny when you think about looking for your cell phone while you're talking on it. That is just, I don't care what anybody says, that's funny. Looking for your glasses and they're on top of your head. Those things, we have to stop and laugh at ourselves. Like, literally, I'm talking on my cell phone, but I'm walking around looking for it and talking to somebody. And most of us, after a certain age, have had that happen to ourselves. I spend most of the day using my watch to find my phone. And so those just using laughter as a way to realize that life really can be enjoyable, and it really does break up the monotony when we can use laughter. And in the transition, I think it's really important to find the things that bring you joy. I like to say now, protect my peace at all costs, right? So no matter what's happening, if I have to tap out of something because it's kind of messing with my peace, I will. I need to maintain my peace. And so I think joy and laughter are the things that help you maintain peace. And so not everything in the world is funny. I get that, but there are times when you just need a laugh. And the laugh can really change your perspective. And for some people, maybe it only changes your perspective for a little while. I think about laughter as it relates to the process of grief. And when you get to the place when you can start telling funny stories about the person that you're mourning, that's really when you've reached the place where you've allowed laughter to come in. Most of us know that there are joyful stories associated with the loss of somebody. And so, my siblings and we lost our dad back in 2022. And we now are to the place where we just get a kick out of telling stories about things that are happening, or we'll make a reference to something that's funny as it relates to my dad. And so I think overall in life, laughter can really help us. Joy can really help us move through life with a lot less pain and help us in that transition to see things a little bit clearer. When we take a step back, we laugh, we realize life doesn't have to be that serious all the time, that there are times where we can really take a step back, laugh, joke, have some fun, and then go back to the serious parts of life, because there's enough serious parts of life to go around.
That's beautiful, Lisa. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's such a great reminder for all of us how important laughter and joy and, just having those moments where it does change our emotions, our feelings, kind of what's happening inside our body just completely shifts when we have those belly laughs. And it is a reminder that none of us are going to make it out alive. Okay. We can't take every minute of every day so seriously. We do have to have joy. We do have to have laughter. It's what helps us get through the times that are challenging, that are difficult. And without them, I mean, it's not good, right? I love the story that you shared about racing in those cars. I can just picture it, and the laughter, the teasing and the ribbing, all of that is so life affirming too. It's like the time that you spend with your friends and just laughing, right? So that is such an important part that we need to remember to continue through every day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. So let me see where we're at. Okay. What do you say to people that you're talking to are like, I don't even know what I want to do next?
Those are the best people to start with. And I start with them and say, imagine what's next. And so I'll usually walk them through an exercise that's based on, tell me every possibility of thing that you could do. Just make this list. It could be as long as you want. What are all the possibilities of things that you could do next? And then we take that list. Let's pare it down to the things that you just wrote down because you thought about it, but you really don't want to do that. It's a possibility, but yeah, it's really want to. Yes, it's a possibility you could run a 10K, but you don't really want to train for a 10K, right? So what are the things? Let's narrow down the list from possibilities to what are the things that you really want to think about pursuing. So we try to get that list down to, maybe 5 things that are on there that you might want to start pursuing. Now let's start attacking those 5 things into how does this relate to what your passion is? How does this relate to how you want to spend your life? What are your values? That's the other exercise that we'll go through is what do you value? What is most important to you, right? Having people tie what you're going to do next to what you value is really important, because when we're doing things that are not within our values, there's a strain, there's a pull, because we're doing stuff that it's not valuable to us. And so we get stuck in jobs and the values of the company are not our values. There becomes a tension. People talk about toxic work environments. It'll appear very toxic to you if their values are not your values. And so identifying your values, identifying what your possibilities are, trying to match those possibilities to those values, and think about what you're passionate about. And now let's walk that through to what you might be able to do next. And maybe there are 2 different avenues of places that you can go next, what you're going to do next with your life, what you're going to do next with your career, what you're going to do next in retirement. Maybe there's two avenues that we're going to go down, but we're going to talk through which ones, and typically with people, the light goes on and you can see the passion in one versus the other, right? Sometimes people start talking about things and they'll light up. And, I usually will say to them, do you realize the change in your voice and how you lit up when you talked about this versus how you talked about that? And it helps people to see what they can't see, which is I really do have an affinity to go in that direction. And maybe I'm not because I'm afraid, but then we can walk down the street of all the fear. But really helping to try to identify what's the thing that aligns all of those pieces together for that person is where we're really going to start.
Yeah, that's great advice. Make a list of however many things you can think of, just ideas that pop into your head, whether you actually pursue them or not, doesn't really matter. Just using your imagination to think of every possible thing that excites you, that you are curious about, whatever. And then I love that you said, now look at your values and look at the thing, whatever it is that you're considering, and how does that align? And does it light you up? Does it make you excited? Can you think about popping out of bed every day to do that thing? And, that's great. All of us can do that right now. Good stuff. Okay. So then you kind of detailed once you start going through and narrowing down and sort of eliminating things that maybe, aren't really possible, don't really interest you as much, don't align with your values. What's some small steps then that we can do to pursue what maybe is interesting us?
Yeah, one of them is do some homework. Whatever it is that you're going to pursue, somebody's already doing it. Try not to recreate the wheel. Do some homework on who might be doing what you want to do, whether it's write a book, whether it's start a blog, whether it's start a podcast. Who's already doing what you're doing? Do some research on it. Try to connect with some of those people, right? There's easy ways to connect. Most people are willing to share information for free. Right. So people reach out and said, hey, can I connect with you? I want to talk. Sure. Like most people are willing to spend 15, 20, 30 minutes with someone, even if they don't know them, to just talk about it. Right. As a general rule, we want to help people. And so find somebody who's doing what you're doing already. Reach out to them and see if they'll spend some time with you. You may have to reach out to 6 people before you get somebody who says yes. But figure out if this is what you really want to do by figuring out who's already doing it. Identify whether, yes, they're doing it, I like what they're doing, or maybe they'll convince you really don't want to do this and it's really hard and it's not that satisfying, but it will help you. So one of the things you do is some research on it, your own research, whether it's the internet or whatever. Reach out to people, but find more about the thing that you want to do so you can then have your background information about whether this is it. And then once you figure out, okay, this is it, what are the first 3 steps that I need to take, right? And I like 3 is a great number. What are the first 3 things that I need to take, steps that I need to take to get this started, right? Because you've already done your research, so you have an idea of how to start it now. But what are the first 3 things that I need to do? If I'm starting a company, is the first thing I need to do is get my LLC or incorporated or whatever you need to do? Is that the first thing you need to do? How are you going to go about doing what it is that you're going to do? Identify your first 2 tasks.
Yeah, great advice. Super, super good advice. Do your research. Find out, is this really what I think it is?
Mhm.
Or is it just an idea I have in my head of how I think it's going to be? And talking to people who are already doing it is going to help you get that answered. And then, okay, great. It sounds like something I still want to pursue. Doing more research, talking to more people, digging into it a little bit more. And I love that you said 3 steps, because a lot of times we can have about 100 things. Well, I need to do this and this and this and this and this. And then it becomes so overwhelming, you don't even take step one.
Yes.
Yeah. So 3 is a great number. Let's start with 1, 2, 3. Let's get those things marked off and then we can move on. But it all starts with that research and doing your homework. So good advice. Thank you, Lisa. Okay. So let's talk about you and what advice you would give to yourself pre-retirement.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things I would tell myself, but the primary one I would tell myself is be ready for the identity crisis thing, right? Recognize that that you're going to go through a period of time where there is a small degree of mourning of the career that you had, right? And so initially when I first retired, I'm like connected with people and everything. And I realized that I needed to take a bit of a step back because now I'm on LinkedIn and I'm seeing all the things people do. And I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't have retired yet. Maybe I should, and the reality is at no point did I ever feel that way. Maybe I shouldn't have retired, but I say it because I'm reading other things and I'm like, you know, you don't want to get up and go to work every day. So why are you like looking at other people's things as if, but just realizing that if I had to do it again, to start again, I would have had my plan. So one of the mistakes that I made, I think, in addition to that, was I tried to do everything as soon as I retired. I had lots of ideas about what I wanted to do, and I tried to do them all at once, right? So I was like, okay, I'm gonna, get my consulting business back up and running, and I'm gonna do, I want to do executive coaching. Now I found out about retirement coaching. I'm taking all these classes and doing, and I have an executive coach still, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, so, I told her, she's like, why are you doing all this? She said, first of all, we agreed that you wouldn't do anything for 6 months. I'm like, I know, but I have all these great ideas. She said, slow down. She's like, you realize that you have plenty of time to do all this. It all does not need to be done right this minute. And I just realized I had been so used to moving fast and getting things done and having an agenda that being able to give myself time and grace to say, yeah, I'm going to do that next year. That's my project for the year after that. I literally was trying to do it all at one time. And so just knowing that yes, you can do things, you can have a plan, but you also have to give yourself some time to work through the fact that you've been working 30, 40 years and you deserve to just rest and do nothing. It's okay to do nothing. And I think that was giving myself permission to do nothing for a longer period of time. I would have done that. I would have given myself permission to do nothing longer. I did nothing for a few weeks. And then I was like, okay, ready to get going. And so that would be one thing I would go back and say, here's your plan for the next year. I mean, I'm coming up on a year. And if I told you all the things I've done in a year, you're like, no, that wasn't really retirement. Because I pushed it, I did so many things. And it's so funny, after I got some of those things done, now I'm like, yeah, I'm a little tired. And so I've really kind of stepped back and taken on less. And I'm like, I'm not taking any, I'm just not going to sign up for everything that comes across my desk. And people are like, oh, do you want to do this? Do you want to sign up for this? Hey, we got this program going on. That I've learned to say, I think I'm going to do nothing this week. And so I wished I had incorporated that better at the beginning.
Mm. Yeah, good stuff, Lisa. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's important, again, to plan,
Hmm.
plan, and build in that time when you retire to just do nothing and give
Yeah,
yourself the freedom to do that. And you're so right. We are just like go, 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 go all the time. And when we're excited about something, we want to do it.
right.
And so it's very easy to just like jump right back in, feet
Exactly.
first and go. But by having your plan and building that time in to give yourself some space to rest, recover, change the way that you do your daily life, and then, move into the next thing that excites you. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Especially if you're kind of a type A or you're kind of overachiever, which I can be. I had in my office a small whiteboard on the wall and it had, lists of goals on it. I'm going to get this done by Q2. I'm going to get a public board seat by this date, da, da, da. And I just took it down off the wall. I just took it down off the wall this past week and said, you are in a rush for no reason. You still have time. To me, I was like, I had to catch the curve, right? In my mind, I had to catch the curve. I don't want to be out of it for too long. And I took it down, and the wall is blank right now. And I keep staring at it, looking for the goals list, but the wall is blank. And it's actually kind of relaxing that the wall is blank. And that goes for people in the transition as well. You will create a to-do list that is longer than you would like it to be. And you will be stressed by your to-do list. And sometimes we just need to take the to-do list down. And again, what are the 3 things that I need to do, right? And so 3 things is so much easier to deal with than a list of things. You can have the laundry list over here and pull 3 things off of it, but only have 3 things. And I told myself the whiteboard's cleaned, it's going to be cleaned, and it's going to have 3 things on it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great stuff, Lisa. So true. I think we just, I don't know, maybe it's the idea of, society says we have to be doing something all the time. And so we just don't know how to get out of that unless we give ourselves permission to take down that whiteboard, take down that to-do list, slow down, just pull the most important things and work on those. And then, like you said, go to the next few things. So I think that's great advice that we can all, look at how it applies to our life
Mhm.
and what we're
Mhm.
doing. Well, good stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've read a quote by Dr. Charles Swindoll, and he says, humans are the only creatures who run faster when they lose their way. And I thought to myself, that is completely accurate. The more we lose our way, the faster we run to try to get to. Apparently, we're the only creature that does that, that most animals and creatures slow down, they lose their way, and we run faster. And I had to realize I was running faster, but not necessarily going in the direction that I was choosing to go. And so I encourage people to just slow down. Sometimes we just need to slow down, figure out which direction we're going, and then we can speed up.
Gosh, thank you so much for sharing that. That is amazing words there. I totally can relate to that. It's
Mhm.
like, if you maybe aren't lost in the woods, okay, but if you're thinking like, I've lost my way on this trail,
Yes.
instead of just stopping where you're at and like figuring, okay, which direction did I come from? Maybe I need to go back that way. We just keep going forward. Like, I'll find my way out if I just keep going forward. And it's like, wait a minute, what am I doing? So
Yes.
I think that's so great. Where did I just come, and am I going the right way? Don't
Yes.
just
Yeah.
run in that direction.
Yeah. Somebody said, I don't know where I got it. It was said, don't just do something, stand there. And I'm like, that's perfect. Like, because we have a tendency to do something, regardless of what it is and whether it makes sense, do something. There's an old saying is, don't just stand there, do something. And the person reversed it and said, don't just do something, stand there until you figure out what you should be doing. Don't just do something. And I thought to myself, that is so typical of us, that when we're overachieving is, if I'm doing something, I'm doing something, but that something isn't necessarily productive.
Yeah, yeah, so true. Gosh, I love that one too. Don't just do something, stand there. Stand there, don't just do something.
Right.
I love it. Oh my gosh, Lisa, this has been amazing. Such a
Abs-
great conversation. So I would love to have you share if there's any last things that you just feel like the listener needs to know that you maybe haven't shared to this point. What would you like to say?
I think if I were going to share anything, it would just be that the plan, whatever it is that you are working on, the plan really does help us to find our way, right? And I think about it like this. When we were in grade school, and I'm going to date myself because I don't know if they even still do it, before you wrote a paper, you had to write an outline. And the outline directed you as to where you were going with the paper. Too often in life, we're not creating the outline. We're just trying to write the paper. And the problem with that is we get to parts and we go in directions that we didn't necessarily plan to because it actually isn't part of the outline. And so I think what I'd encourage people to do is whatever transition point you're at, create the outline. What is it? What is it? Where are you at? Where are you trying to go? And just create those 3, 4 bullets and the sub bullets on the outline. That helps you create the plan. Because without the plan, we really do wind up getting a little helter-skelter, and that's a plan for whatever you're doing. You don't build a house without a plan. Doctor wouldn't walk into the operating room without a plan. Anything that's major requires a plan. And I say, we plan to have everything major in our life, whether it's buy a house, have a child, whatever. All of that, we got a plan. We don't plan to retire. We don't have a plan to retire. And sometimes we don't really have a plan to transition to the next thing. And sometimes we don't have a choice but to transition. We're pushed into transition. But in the being pushed into transition, you still have to take that step back and say, okay, I'm here whether I want to be or not. What's my plan? What am I going to do going forward, as opposed to just doing things? So that would be my encouragement, which is create the outline and then write the story.
Yeah. Great stuff, Lisa. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Excellent parting words for this conversation. Make your outline, get your plan in place, and then move forward. I love that you said not helter-skelter, because I think that in times of transition, it can be very confusing. And so we run willy-nilly, whatever direction, and think that we're going to, solve it by just doing things, right? Kind
Yes.
of going back to the standstill, don't just do something. So great stuff. I love to have my guests share if there's books or podcasts that have been helpful or beneficial. And of course, your book, Retired and Killin It, I'm going to detail the information in the show notes so the listeners can easily find it. Just amazing, amazing stuff. Thank you so much for sharing what the acronym is in the beginning of the episode. But are there any other books or podcasts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I'm actually just starting a book called Inner Excellence by Jim Murphy. A friend recommended it to me. And so far, so good. I'm just started, but it's really about not focusing on all this external stuff, it seems. It's about how do you find the press for success, for example, that we all get this press for success, and we do that before we do the inner stuff. And so in a stage that I'm in where I'd be careful about what the press for success means for me, because I don't want to go back into a world where I feel like I'm, in the hustle. That's really important. I also am rereading a book that I read while I was working called Playing Big by Tara Moore, but I'm now rereading it from a different perspective. At that time, it was a playing big in terms of the work I was doing. And her thing about playing big isn't about title. It's not about, making it to the top. Her thing about playing big is how you play in the area that you're in, how you become your best self in that area. So I'm actually rereading that for where I am today. Because it was very helpful for me from a career perspective, but I also think it could speak to me from the perspective of now, where I want to have this portfolio, which still includes 40% of my time being absolutely retired and doing nothing, and 60% of my time doing some kind of work, whether it's coaching people, writing, speaking, whatever that is. But want to make sure it's not the pursuit of success, but the pursuit of, for me, legacy and impact. And so those have been helpful to me. And I've just gotten into the podcast thing. For me, podcasts were harder when I was working because I didn't spend enough time in the car. And so podcasts are great when you spend a lot of time in the car. I have to say that. But because I didn't spend a ton of time in the car, I'd get halfway through a podcast and then be stuck in the garage trying to finish listening to it. But I have, started to tap into a few podcasts these days. And so just really getting into that podcast world now and trying to find the right ones and the right balance. So I don't have a particular one today, but I've been searching through that looks interesting. And obviously, as I've been speaking on podcasts, they become my, I got to follow that podcast and get engaged with them. So looking forward to that journey, though.
Oh gosh, well, thank you, Lisa, for those recommendations on the books. And you're right. Sometimes we need to go back and reread things that we read before, because now, being in a completely different position,
Yes.
the way that you think about things and whatever the ideas are in the book can hit in a totally different way. And so I think that's a great suggestion as well. But I'll detail the books that you've suggested. And in terms of podcasts, I know it's not for everybody. We, maybe don't have a train ride or long car commute to work or whatever. I love to listen to podcasts when I walk my dog. Some people do it when they're doing their chores around the house. Whatever works for the person listening, it's, you got to follow that. But your curiosity and the point that you made, what am I curious about today and what can I discover, right, by digging through all the podcasts that are out there. So I think it's, using your curiosity to lead the way.
Yes, absolutely. Because the number of podcasts that were out there, as I started to flip through Apple Podcasts, I'm like, wow, there's like topics on everything. And so just like you said, just getting into the space of, I traveled a lot when I was working, and unfortunately you can't listen to podcasts on a plane, which was discouraging because the connection is not good. But now that I'm more settled, I'm like, okay, I can just sit down and listen to the podcast now. Or like you said, if I'm doing work, I can listen to doing some things. I can listen to the podcast doing housework or whatever. It's hard to listen to a podcast when you're working at work because your brain's going in two different directions. But yeah, just the curiosity of what's out there and what can help me for today, or what interesting perspectives are there.
Yes. Yeah.
And it can also give people ideas as to what's next for me.
That's right. Exactly. You hit it right on the head there. It's like, what new idea can I discover? What's something that maybe a perspective of my mind that I can change by hearing some new idea or topic from a conversation? So you absolutely hit it there. Thank you for that. So lastly, Lisa, would you share with the listeners how they can find you and follow along with the work you're doing? If they want to
Yeah.
ask you questions, how would they be able to do that?
Yeah, so I am fairly easy to find because everything is Retired and Killin It. So the website is retiredandkillinit.com. My Facebook is Retired and Killin It. My Instagram is Retired and Killin It. So easy to find me there, easy to connect with me on any of those places. I'm also on LinkedIn under my name, Lisa Haynes. So open to connect with readers anywhere or listeners anywhere. The book is available on Amazon.com. It's also available on my website. In addition to, what I have now, the apparel, t-shirts, hats, whatever people, if you want to walk around says Retired and Killing It, you can. And it's interesting because I have a group that was doing some work with me on a book signing, but they were all younger. So they all have t-shirts that say Retired and Killing It someday. And so they said, you should sell these because we aren't going to be retired and killing it now, but we will someday. And so I was able to get those printed for them. So those are also on the website. But again, I'm reachable any of those places. If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop me a line through any of those resources.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for that. I'll be sure to include the details in the show notes to make it super easy for the listeners to find you. But you have made it very simple. You're the same name everywhere. We can find you on all of the platforms. So I love it. And that's so cute about the t-shirts. Retired and Killing It someday.
Someday.
Yeah, someday. Oh gosh, Lisa, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for this wisdom and knowledge that you've just shared with us. It's just amazing. Thank you again.
Thank you, Desiree. Thank you for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll talk more soon. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.